Chase, that map gets cut out and glued onto your next page in your sketchbook. All right, everybody, so much art history, never enough time to cover it all, so let's go run through the art museum, and we are going to run today. All right, I've already covered this, so I want to talk about the resources of Africa. Africa has tons and tons of resources. And that's what the Europeans all wanted. They wanted to just come in to Africa and take their diamonds, their gold, the coffee, the oil, etc. I want you to know what the Berlin Conference is. Write this down. On November 15th, 1884 to February 26th, 1885, the European nations got together in Berlin and decided to carve up Africa for themselves. With all those resources in Africa, everybody wants those resources. But if they start going in there, they're going to fight each other over the resources. So in order to avoid a war, they agreed that, okay, England, you get this part, and France, you get that part, and Germany, you get this part, etc. They had a big giant map of Africa up on the wall. And it was quite a racist idea that to think that of Africa as being unclaimed, that you just go in there and take it. There was one country, though, that was aware of what was going on. They were aware of the conference. So the king of Ethiopia at that time wrote a letter to the conference stating that Ethiopia was an independent nation, and therefore Ethiopia was spared from the Berlin Conference outcome. So here was the outcome of the Berlin Conference. And you can see Africa here is divided up into these different colors, and these different colors represent the different European nations that colonized or were responsible for different parts of Africa. The yellow areas, that is England, the United Kingdom. The green areas are France. The brown areas are Germany. The purple areas are Italian. The brick red areas are Spain. The light blue areas are Portugal. The dark blue area is Belgium. And then there is Ethiopia right there, the only independent state at this time. Belgium was the instigator of the Berlin Conference. In this map, I have Belgium highlighted up here in that little bit of green, and then the area that they got was the Congo. And you can see how much bigger the Congo is than the nation of Berlin itself. And basically, Berlin sold this idea of, if we don't stake our claims, then we're all going to be fighting over this and we're going to go to war. So that was the selling point. But really, Belgium just wanted to expand their empire. That's all this was. So Africa became divided up amongst the Europeans simply because Belgium just wanted some more land. They wanted to expand themselves. And the meme over there on the right shows that Belgium, you can see how small it is on the map, and Belgium has very little to do with European history. So, it's represented by that Thomas the Tank Engine as being not threatening at all. But when Belgium was in charge of the Congo, they were absolutely horrible to the Africans in that area. They were very cruel. And then during the two world wars, Belgium was nothing more than a speed bump of the Germans invading the rest of Europe. I wanted to share this with you because this affects some of the things that we're talking about. These are the two main religions in Africa are Islam and Christianity. Basically, Christianity is over the southern part of Africa, and this comes in from European influence. As the Europeans came in, they settled in these areas more often than up in the Sahara and in the northern part of Africa. In the northern part of Africa was settled more by those in the Middle East. So, up in Egypt, that is connected to the Middle East, that's where the influence of the Muslim religion comes from. And you can see the yellow area is the area between the Christians and the Muslim, where there's a lot of violence and wars happening, and still happening today. But not only was Europe interested in depleting or of obtaining the resources of Africa, but they are also interested in converting Africa to Christianity. So beginning in the early 1400s to the early 1800s, Europeans would come to Africa to spread Christianity. And during this time, they mostly stayed on the coast of Africa and did not venture inward. But during the 1800s, they started to move closer and closer inland. And the Christian missionaries sent artifacts back home. And my point of telling you all this and how this affects the art of Africa, as Europeans become increasingly in contact with Africans, they will trade with the Africans, they will barter with the Africans, or they will just take from the Africans. And a lot of this African art was coming back home through traders, through colonists, through missionaries, and of that sort. And I found this picture. I try to find an older version of the missionaries where it was basically to convert the Africans to Christianity. Nowadays, missionaries look a lot different, and it's a lot more friendly. It's a lot more, and the missionaries are basically help small communities like build a school, build homes, build wells, and to help improve the lives of the citizens there. This is also a time where slavery became at its peak, and you can see this flow of Africans from Africa to the New World and also up into the Middle East as well. They were taken to some of these other places. When I first saw this map, I was really surprised at I'm assuming that the larger the arrow, the more people were involved in that part of the slave trade. And then when I look at the United States, there's a very small arrow coming up here. So that tells me that most of the slave trade went to South America and the Caribbean as well. But I only hear of the slaves in America, maybe just because I'm an American and it affects us here in America. But I was really surprised at how much more there was in the world. I thought it was just an American thing. All right, moving on. This map right here shows the dates at which the African nations became independent again. So they had to fight and they had to attain their independence from Europe. And it wasn't until the 1960s that most countries in Africa attained their independence from Europe. All right, so that brings us to African art. So we're going to take a look at statuary. And our first culture that we're going to look at is the Dogon culture that is in Mali. And the Dogon culture is in that central part of Mali. If that is a bow tie shaped country, then the Dogon were in the center of that bow tie. And our first sculpture is going to be this ancestral couple. And here we have a man and a woman that I'm assuming is a husband and wife. The man has his arm around the woman, and on the woman's back, you see here, is a child on her back right here, clinging to her back. And then on his back is a quiver for holding arrows. And that shows that they had traditional roles between men and women in their culture, that the man is the hunter and the woman is the caregiver to the children. The body parts are overly simplified and the heads and torsos are exaggerated. It's made out of wood. And because this has survived, it is believed that this is an important couple. One thing I want to point out is that this comes from a tree trunk or a tree limb, and a lot of the art that we're going to look at comes from a tree limb. So you can see the outer edges of the tree on the base, and notice how nothing else sticks out from that. I can also almost imagine the cylinder of the tree like as this imaginary barrier around it, and nothing jets out from it. It's all carved from one piece of wood. All right, moving on. We're going to go to the Bali civilization. And we'll take a look at the bush spirit. Sculptures like this one would be ordered through a trance diviner, and would be used by that trance diviner as a source of inspiration and power. So there is a spirit inside of the sculpture. And the client, so here's how the situation would work. A client would go to the diviner with problems, and the diviner places the sculpture in between him and the client. And here is the diviner right here. So the bush spirit then goes into the diviner, and the diviner goes into a trance possessed by the spirit. And then the diviner knows how to solve the client's problems. And then when the figures are not being used by the diviner, then it's placed in a shrine. But notice the white chalk that is drawn on the floor. Notice the white chalk that is on the man's arms and face and legs. All right, and that is white kaolin clay. And it has a spiritual power to it. It's also used in makeup. But these diviners will put that powder on themselves as part of the ritual. And then you can see on the bush spirit sculptures, they have put the powder on the face of the sculptures as well. We're going to move on to Nigeria. And we're going to take a look at the Mbari house. Now, these figures are made by people, and they're made out of clay. And they have these exaggerated heads, torsos, and necks, and that expresses dignity and aloofness and power. And they're creating images of gods. Also, once again, look at the cylindrical nature of the arms and the neck and the legs. And then they would put these figures inside of a house. So they'll build this house out in the middle of the jungle, and you can see these statues are on the inside of the house. And they're made because the gods demand that humans build them houses. So the figures are of the gods, and then the gods demand that the people build houses for them. And these clay sculptures are unfired. What is the purpose of firing clay? It hardens to clay. You can get it. You can take a piece of fired clay, pour water in it, and it holds the water without getting wet. What happens if you make a bowl and and you don't fire it out of clay, and you pour water in it? That water is going to soak into the clay, and it's just going to turn into mud. All right, these are unfired sculptures. So when they put these sculptures out in the elements, what's going to happen eventually? Yeah, they'll deteriorate. And the houses are meant to deteriorate as well. These are not permanent houses. So they'll set up this scene with the gods in their house, and you come back a few years later, and it's all fallen over, and the clay figures will be nowhere to be seen because it's in a jungle. It's a very wet climate, and the clay will just turn into mud. Here's a close up of some of the figures, and the figure on the left is Amadioa, and it's one of their gods, and he is portrayed in this instance as a white colonist, but that is the god. And there's a fan art picture of the god over there on the right. He's the Mbari thunder god, and on the left, the photo on the left, he is with his wife Igbo. All right, let's take a look at some reliquaries. This is a bark box. And inside this bark box, it holds bones and skulls of the ancestors. This is a reliquary. You remember the reliquaries of the Romanesque era. Whereas the Romanesque reliquaries would have the bones and body parts and clothing of saints and important religious people, these would hold the body parts of ancestors. Now, does it look secure to you? It's a lid on a box. It's not secure. So, how do you secure it? You put a sculpture on it. So, these are reliquary guardians, and they guard the lid of the box. Now, could you just set the sculpture aside and then open the box? Yeah, sure. But these figures would have spiritual importance, and the people of that time would believe that the spirits would inhabit this, and they wouldn't dare remove the spirit to remove the lid. So there's a variety of different reliquary guardians. Some would stand on top of it, some would be in a seated position to sit on it to keep it from being opened. Once again, notice how these look like they are made from a tree trunk. They have that shape where the arm, it's a very closed shape. The arms do not stretch out, the legs do not stretch out. It fits within a branch or a tree trunk. Thank you. I feel blessed. All right, and here is one from the Kota region in Gabon, and this one is made out of metal. And some of these reliquary guardians are made out of metal. This one's a little bit more abstract. Once again, we can compare these to the reliquaries and relics of the Romanesque era. And whereas the Romanesque ones are made of gold, and they would have body parts of saints on the inside, the African ones are made out of wood and would have, or the bark box would be made out of wood and have the ancestors on the inside, and it would be reliquary guardian that keeps that lid from being opened. We are going to head over to the Congo now. That should be in green. I want you to know Congo. And we're going to take a look at a nail figure. I put this photo in here to give you a sense of the size of the figure. However, in this photo, you can see that the one on the left is about the same size as the photo we just looked at, but the one in the center is much bigger. It looks even life size. But there's figures of these nail figures are of different sizes. The larger figure is to probably represent a group instead of an individual, or the larger figures might be for warriors. The smaller figure might be for a family group. Here are some different variations of the nail figure. So these are made out of wood and brass. When missionaries saw the Nikisi figures, they wanted to burn them. Nikisi refers to spirit. And Nikisi also refers to medicine. There are herbs, and herbs are used in the ritual that this is used in to heal the body and the spirit. There are spirits living inside the statue, and they incorporate healing powers for the king and better crops. And these have the power to give life and heal, but they also have the power to cause harm. And the Nganja or the Nganga is the person who used the Nikisi figure. And they used the figure to heal. They used the figure to record agreements and contracts and to be used as a witness. And the figures or the nail figures would be activated to go after evildoers, to go after someone who broke an oath or did you wrong. The Nganga would use the figure to help his clients. And the Nganga would ask a sculptor to make this. And to activate the figure, the Nganga would hammer nails into it. That's where the nails come from. The nails' blades are inserted in to call upon the spirit. And then the abdomen, which is the stomach, is the case for holding the spiritual medicine. And the moyo is the spiritual center of the body. The belly is the focal point of the soul. And here's another one. You can see the open area that would have had probably it has a cavity in the center, and that's where the medicines are placed. And the sphere and the shell are missing. This one has the sphere and the shell included. And once again, every time to activate the figure, a nail is inserted. So you can see how many times this figure has been activated. And it brings healing to the client. And they wonder if the nails in the jaw refer to tooth pain. This side view, you can see the nails that are hammered into the chest. And here is an x-ray of the nail figure and how many nails it has in it. If we have time, we'll come back to this video. All right, so we are going to now discuss the masquerades. And basically, with masquerades, we'll be looking at masks. Masquerades were important before colonial rule, and masquerades are still important today. Masks hold powers. They hold regulatory powers and judicial powers. And in some societies, only priests can wear the masks. In some societies, they allowed the wearer to apprehend witches, socially undesirables, and to take human life. And the masked dancers are channeling ancestor spirits and nature spirits in their dance. And the mask is the focal point of the outfit. Dancers will hold objects as part of the dance, but the mask, the objects, the music, the dance all invoke the specific named spirit. Several masked dancers act out stories in a ritualized dance. Sometimes parodies of deviant behavior are shown as a sort of morality play. And sometimes maskers take boys away from the mother to be initiated and schooled and return months or even years later. So we're going to go back to the Dogon region and take a look at the Satimbe mask. This is part of the Dogon masquerade. And these masks tell creation stories. The legend says that when women were first ancestors, the women were the first ancestors to imitate animal spirits using masks. They were the first masqueraders. Then men took over the masking process and barred women from involvement in the masking. And the Satimbe mask represents all women, which is a reference to the legend. So these are masks that in the museum, and this is what the mask would look like when worn. So here is a Dogon masking ritual. All right, that gives you a little taste of what the masking ritual would look like for the Dogon culture. We're going to move on to the Dan culture. Write down the word Dan. And these are Dan spirit masks. The mask types are police and chasers, pretty singers, firemen, warriors, strangers, and animals. And the mask is a channel for communication with the spirit world. That is part of this Dan culture. You notice these masks are very different than the Dogon mask. The Dogon masks were so tall. I was really impressed at that video. They had those masks that were like maybe 15 feet tall, and they were able to dance with them on there. That's pretty incredible. All right, so In the Dan culture, in a village with inhabitants, that would be the human world. But the forest outside the village is the spirit world. So, in order for humans to travel into the spirit world, they must wear items from both worlds and saying a prayer before venturing out into the spirit world. The mask protects the young men from evil forces from initiation to day as they enter the spirit realm. Once the dancer dons the mask he is transformed into the spirit. And the mask wearer goes into a deep trance and brings messages from the ancestors. And the messages are incoherent, and there's uncontrollable utters coming from the dancer. So a wise man accompanies the dancer and translates the message. Usually the messages are words of advice for a long life, good health, and prosperity. And boys enter training camp and stay for years learning tribal ways and morals. And once they're initiated, this is when they become an adult. So the spirits come to the initiated in dreams, and after they dream, the individual has to make a mask, giving the spirit life. Before carving, he cleanses himself and then sets off into the forest to find a suitable wood for the mask. And then he goes into the training camp, carves it, creates the story, the music, and dance to accompany the mask at the next ritual. And the mask stays in the community forever, passing down through generations. All right, so we are going to look at a few minutes. So the person in the dress is a spirit of the ancestor. Right now, it's not a conscious person, but a spirit speaking through the person. And then over here, this guy right there is interpreting the message of the spirit. All right. All right, that's just a little taste of the Dan culture. Move on to raffia. All right, I want you to know what raffia is. This is a raffia plant, and these are all the, I guess, for lack of a better word, these strings coming off of the raffia plant, and which is used in a lot of mask making. So we're going to go now to Guinea, and we're going to look at the Dumba mask. So this mask is made out of wood. It is of a female. You can see the breasts, and one of the descriptions I saw of this, it was the breasts were described as pendulous breasts, like a pendulum that swing back and forth. She is the ideal Baga woman. She bears many healthy children, and young men who aspire to work in the fields would wear this mask, and that would give the culture agriculture fertility in agriculture and well-being. So you can see the mask coming through, and you can see the raffia that is down below. And you can, the holes that are here are for the raffia to be attached to it. Raffia is used in a lot of mask making. This is a Banda mask. It's an absolutely huge mask. And despite its unwieldy size, dancers move with precision when they wear this. Today, it is only used for entertainment, but historically, it had a religious significance, appearing only to village elders. The mask was used to protect against dangers, which would be animal attacks or other malevolent people. And it was likely used during male initiation rituals. It was performed in a circular arena surrounded by onlookers with drums and gongs. The dance evokes different animals, like the soaring bird or the foot stamping bull, an undulating serpent, and the dance ends in a fast twirling where the mask is being held aloft. The twirling mask in a series of figure eights, and then they throw it to the ground and before replacing it on his head, all without missing a beat. We're looking at the different designs that are in there, and I like these abstract designs. It has a very crocodile type look to it. And I really like these abstract forms that are in the mask. All right, we're going to move on to the Mende culture in Sierra Leone. And these are also female masks, but in this culture, it's very unique that it is the women that wear the mask, and the mask refers to the ideal of female beauty, morality, or behavior. They wear the mask on top of their heads as headdresses, and the black raffia costume hides the identity of the wearer. Mende men and women alternate control of society every 3 years. Mende means female, Poro means male. And the high forehead on these figures denotes wisdom and success. Notice the rolls of neck fat and the small faces and the eye slits. That symbolizes the women's roles as mother, wife, family provider, and keepers of medicine. This one has a spirit coming out from the top of the head. This one's the small mouth is it's a reference to the need to be quiet. The silence is a serious demeanor that is expected of recent initiates. And the hair is done in a ritualistic manner. And we have these bone numb masks. And these are the gods of the bush. And they protect the villager from outside threats. Also used for funerals of important chiefs, former dancers. The ceremonies are only at night, and the mask helps deceased elders become ancestor in the afterlife. The mask is also used to discipline women into good behavior, and women are forbidden to look at the mask even during ceremonies. They will become ill if they do. And these are so sacred, only men who are members of a secret society are allowed to look at the masks. Nobody but the dancers are allowed to touch the mask, and when not in use, the masks are in a sanctuary outside of the village. All right, we're going to go to the Kuba culture that is in the Congo. And if we have time, we will come back to this video here. But I have a story time. Now, this is a very brief story. I don't have much information. I have tried to find as much information about this as I could, but because the African traditions are oral and not written down, there is almost nothing I could find online about this story. But anyways, Ngadi Amwash and Noshambui are husband and wife. They're king and queen, but they're also brother and sister. The other brother is Boom, and he is deformed. He has dwarfism, and in the story, he's been called a pygmy, which is a like a slur on that. But Boom is also vying for the affection of Ngadi. Anyways, he is a commoner. He is not of royalty like the others are. And he gives the State of the Union address to the king and the queen. And he has a connection. He is because he is a commoner, not royalty, that he is in touch with the common people of the society. And so he is able to speak for them. And he lets the king and the queen know how the people are feeling or what is going on in the kingdom. And that's really all I know of the story. But this is the Moshambui mask, and it is for the king. And it serves the social control functions and embodies the king's supernatural and political powers. You notice that a lot of shells are used on these masks. And there's different variations of the Moshambui mask. This is the Boom mask. This is the dwarf brother. And you notice that he has that enlarged forehead that you commonly see with people of dwarfism. See, the bulging forehead represents the legendary dwarf or pygmy who often vies for the attention of the beautiful ancestral Ngadi Amwash. The Kuba culture encompassed the Twa people, and the Twa people were the blacks among blacks, quote unquote, is what I got from one of my art history sources. They stood out as being very different from all the other Africans, and they were very short and dwarfish. This is the Ngadi Amwash mask, and she is the sister and the queen. And she is quite beautiful, and you can see a lot of detail in um, the patterns that are on the mask. All right, and so they reenact recreation stories while rehearsing various forms of archetypal behavior that instruct young men during initiation and reinforce the Kuba societal values. They have over the top decoration that reflects the sumptuousness of the Kuba king. All right, and then I have a video of this dance, and that'll finish us for African art. This is the key. This is the Cuba king, the actual king of Cuba. So they do a dance for the king. And then here's the Mushambui mask. And that's the mask of the king. That's the Nagati mask. That's the beautiful sister, queen. And then there is the Bloom mask. Okay, everybody, that'll finish us for African art. Glue those maps into your sketchbooks. We will deal with those maps when we come back from Thanksgiving. Are there any questions about anything that we've seen? All right. I have started making the test for Unit 4. For a slide ID, we will only have 10 works of art instead of 20 to memorize. I hope that'll make everybody happy. Have a great day, everybody. Have a great week. I'll see you when we come back. Put it in the light folder. I'm going to go through the light folder again. Good morning. How you doing?